SLED 10 is packed with so many innovative features, it's hard to know which ones to talk about. I guess the desktop effects that we introduced in SLED 10 are one of my favorite features. Just to sit on an airplane or in a cafe and flip the cube on your desktop around or scale out all the windows is really fun because of the expressions and the people sitting next to you. And people always lean over and say, "Where can I get that?" So I tell them. What we did in SLED 10 is we decided to take advantage of the 3D accelerated video hardware that's sitting on basically any computer you purchased over the last 2 or 3 years that's been dormant all this time while you use your desktop, and to make use of it to accelerate animations, to render off-screen buffers and then blit them to the screen for flicker-free animation effects, to do some 3D effects that make the desktop feel more physical and lifelike and more fun to use. So that's been really exciting for us. Another really innovative feature in SLED 10 is the Beagle search engine. One of the cool things with SLED 10 is that wherever your data is, whatever form it's in, whether it's a file or an email or an attachment on an email or a note you have somewhere or a file inside a zip archive or anything like that, you can find it really easily. With SLED 10, the Beagle search infrastructure will index all your data, all your files. The content gets indexed, they get assorted into a timeline, you can search for them and find everything. Beagle even indexes web pages that you've visited in the past, so if you ever have to answer that question, where did I read that thing about XYZ? I can't remember if it was an email or a web page or an IM conversation. No matter which one of those it is, Beagle will be able to find it. One of the great things about using Suse Linux Enterprise Desktop is that you can just take a piece of hardware off the shelf like a printer or a scanner or an iPod and plug it into your machine, and instead of having to configure your hardware, what we've done is we've made it so just the right thing happens. So when you plug in a printer, it gets configured and it gets set up for you automatically. When you plug in a digital camera, it asks if you want to import the photos from the camera into your photo library. If you plug in an iPod, your music application starts and it lets you copy music onto the iPod or play music from the iPod. So it's very simple, it's very easy, and this ease of plug and play is what makes SLED a really great desktop environment. Another great feature in Suse Linux Enterprise Desktop is that this is the first desktop that has superb open source multimedia support out of the box. Through our work in the community and with partners, we've produced the Helix Banshee program. And Helix Banshee is a one-stop music solution. It lets you play music off of your music library on your computer. It lets you rip CDs, and it'll actually encode all the tracks into MP3s, and then you can copy them to your music device, whatever kind of device that is. And it'll stream music off the internet, it'll synchronize your podcasts. It's a full-featured application. In the past, Linux users haven't had that kind of functionality out of the box with their distribution. One of my favorite features in Suse Linux Enterprise Desktop is the Tomboy note-taking application. When I have a thought or I'm in a meeting and I need to take something down quickly, I just click on Tomboy, type, hit escape, and it's saved. That's all. It's done. I can create links between notes easily, and I can search them all very easily. So it's a great way for me to keep my thoughts organized, and I love that. If you're deploying Suse Linux Enterprise Desktop in a company, you need to be able to just drop the machine in your existing network and have it work perfectly. And that means it should speak all the file formats that you need. It should speak all the network protocols that you need it to speak. So you don't have to change any of your other systems. If you have to modify your servers or change your other clients in order to deploy Linux, that's a barrier that we can't have. With SLED, we've done a lot of work to make Active Directory work perfectly. So offline authentication, authentication against AD servers, finding the nearest domain controller to authenticate against, Kerberized authentication against websites, one-stop authentication against your printers. It's all there. And we've done tons of work with our partners and our customers to make that possible. A lot of people, when they look at deploying a Linux desktop, think about, how can I deploy this in a thin client environment? They want to be able to centralize all their data and all their applications and all the management, so they don't have to worry about users installing rogue software on their machines or walking out of the building with the machine and all the company's sensitive data there. And they don't have to worry about controlling and centrally managing and locking down all these machines that are spread all around the company, or spending elevator time sending administrators around. So we have great support for thin client environments with Suse Linux Enterprise. And you can actually create a thin client installation of Suse Linux Enterprise Desktop that's customized for your needs so that you can run Firefox on the machine, on the thin client, and run OpenOffice or your other applications on a server that sits in the back office. And if you need to run a Windows application, you can even run that. You can have an isolated set of Windows blades that run just a few Windows applications that you need, 1% of the time, and display those onto your Linux thin client. So that's a really powerful capability that has a lot of advantages. After you've deployed a couple thousand Linux desktops in your company, you need a way to manage them. And the ZenWorks Linux Management System 7.2 from Novell gives you the ability to perfectly control your Linux desktops. So you can install new software on them, update their software, lock down which applications your users can use, customize settings, change the homepage in the web browser or the background on the desktop, all that from a central console, which gives you total control over your Linux deployments. I think what's really amazing to people about SLED 10 is just the number of innovations that have shown up in there. People have gone from thinking about the Linux desktop as technically trailing Windows to seeing very obviously the many ways in which we're ahead. And a lot of that's happened in just the year and a half or so before we launched SLED. So I'm excited to see what the next 2 years or so bring, as I think the pace of innovation is only going to increase.